Councillors and members of the public, before we commence the meeting, I'd like to draw your attention to the fire regulations which are displayed on the screen behind me. Also, please ensure your mobile phones are switched to silent. Councillors, can I ask you to speak directly into the microphone? We are being webcast. Make sure the card is pushed firmly into the console. Members of the public, I'd like to say that as a committee we understand that matters under consideration tonight can be emotive. This is a meeting held in public. It's not a public meeting. Therefore, I would respectfully ask you to respect those around you in the public gallery and the committee and refrain from any booing, cheering or any other form of disturbance. So now let's move on to the main items of business. Minutes of the meeting took place on the 3rd of June, have been laid on the table for the last 30 minutes. Are you content that I sign these as a correct record of that meeting? Agreed. Thank you very much. Have there been any apologies for absence, Emma?
We have apologies from Councillor Sam Pritchard, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Item 3, declarations of interest. Have members declared any interest before this meeting, Emma?
None received before the meeting, Chairman.
Do members have any other non-pecuniary or disclosable pecuniary interest to declare?
Pat always starts.
Pat?
Chairman, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
I'd like
very
to
kind.
Disclose my interest at Farnham Town Council. I have not been on their planning committee, therefore I have not discussed any of the items that are before me.
Thank you, Councillor Frost.
Sorry, Chairman, can I just come back? It might be an idea if we could seek some kind of dispensation for town councillors of some sort, and it must apply to the other committees as well. So do you think we could look at that?
Noted. Thank you very much. I agree totally with that. Councillor Potts.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Frost actually beat me to it. Exactly the same. Not on the planning committee, but I am a member of Farnham Town Council. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you. Yes, that's all. All noted, and Emma will take that one on board, please. Question 4, members. Have there been any questions received from members of the public, Emma?
None received, Chairman.
Thank you. Item 5, are there any updates to government guidance or legislation that the committee should be aware of? Paul?
I can confirm there are no updates since the last meeting.
Thank you very much. Surely.
No, I was just going to add, at the last meeting at Southern, Councillor Mulliner suggested that we put an update in for relevant court cases, which I thought was a good suggestion, so perhaps we could incorporate that into Western so that the advice and guidance is the same for both committees.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cowan. Item 6, Thames Basin Heath Special Protection Area Position Statement on the current capacity. The table printed in the agenda has been updated with the latest SANG figure. Could I ask the officers to add anything to this?
Thank you, Chairman. I think you've said it all. It's a standard report which members get at every Western Planning Committee, and really just to highlight that the current unallocated capacity at Farnham Park is 190 dwellings.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Matthew. Members, do you have any questions on that? Anything to add? Noted. Thank you very much indeed. 7, applications for planning permission, site visits. In the event of a site inspection being necessary as a result of considerations of the application at this meeting, these will be held on Tuesday the 4th of August at a time to be agreed. Let's move on to the planning applications. Item A1, WA 2014/2387. The application is for the erection of 21 affordable dwellings following the demolition of the existing buildings together with associated works at 40 Waverley Lane and staff car park opposite Farnham, GU9 8UP. Catherine, would you like to introduce this application to the committee?
Thank you, Chairman. The application site comprises two parts. The northern part of the site is formerly a car park associated with the former Unigate Dairy Crest buildings on the southern side of the Waverley Lane. The proposed application is for the erection of 21 affordable homes. They would comprise 9 flats on the northern portion of the site, together with 12 dwellings on the southern part. I will just quickly take you through some of the elevations. You've seen them before at the previous meeting. These are the plots which front onto Waverley Lane and the ones which are on the other side. This would be in the corner adjacent to number 38 Waverley Lane, and again the two at the top of the site where the land rises up and back down through towards the centre of the site. This is the block of flats which would be on the northern portion of the site. This is obviously the northern site, the railway to the north, and this is just an example of the existing dairy buildings on site. This is the southernmost part of the site, obviously with the slope going up, with the single-storey building at the back here. These are the properties that have recently been completed at number 9 Chestnut Avenue. As you can see from the fence line here, there is a slope down. They're set on a lower level to the application site at that point. This is a view across the site towards the property in Green Lane, number 65, which was the property that members who attended the site visit, that was the garden from which we viewed the site. And equally, this is the view and the position of plots A8 and A9 are indicated here. This is just a plan to show some of those key distances which will be key to members' consideration of the application this evening. And this, albeit faint, section drawing has been supplied by the applicants to try and indicate the section through the site, with Green Lane on this side and Chestnut Avenue on this side, with the application site in the centre, although it is acknowledged by the applicants that this is not entirely correct with regards to the properties in Green Lane. Just briefly direct you to your update sheet. You'll see there have been a couple of updates to note. Reasons for refusal numbers 2 and 3 relate to the signing of unilateral undertakings with regards to affordable housing and SPA contributions. At this time, they haven't been received as completed, so those reasons remain in effect. There are additionally an additional comment from Network Rail to be noted, and some additional letters of representations have been received with regards to the section drawing which we reconsulted on. The key issues for members to consider are the principle of development, the housing mix, the provision of affordable housing, highways, access and parking issues, drainage and the effect upon the SPA. Members must exercise their judgment with regards to the loss of the existing lawful commercial and employment generating use on the site, the density, visual impact, layout and design of the proposals, and the impact on residential amenity. The recommendation is that permission be refused for the reasons set out on pages 44 to 45 of the agenda. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. This item is subject to public speaking. I understand the procedure has been explained to you. Unfortunately, Mr. Borough, the objector, is not present, so I turn to Emma Barnett. You have 3 minutes from when you start speaking.
Thank you. The clear message coming from central government is that the planning system should do everything it can to support housing delivery. The National Planning Policy Framework confirms that this means granting planning permission for development proposals where relevant policies are out of date, unless any adverse impacts of so doing would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. It clarifies that relevant policy should not be considered up to date if the local planning authority cannot demonstrate a 5-year supply of deliverable housing sites. The Officer's report before you confirms that the Council's latest estimate suggests a housing land supply of only 3.7 years, significantly short of the 5 years required by the NPPF. The Council's housing policies are therefore out of date. Members do not need me to remind them of the chronic need for housing, in particular affordable housing in the area. At April this year, there were 1,558 households on the Council's housing register. Of these, 324, or 21%, currently live in the Farnham area. The proposals before you were subject to pre-application discussion with your officers, and the number of units have been reduced in response to concerns regarding overdevelopment. To lose any further units would make the scheme unviable. My client supports your officer's view that the site has limited potential to provide accommodation for other industrial or commercial uses, and that this is an appropriate site for residential development. Your officer is recommending that the application be refused on 3 grounds, 2 of which relate to the failure to complete the necessary legal agreements. As I can confirm that the applicant has confirmed its willingness to enter into the necessary legal agreements and is working to that effect, and clearly any permission could be subject to their completion. The other reason for refusal relates to the perceived unacceptable impact on 11 Chestnut Avenue. As your officer mentioned, there's been a new section that's been prepared since the last committee. It would appear that there was a minor error in terms of the property on Green Lane. This was because it was based on an OS base plan, and there's subsequently been extensions. This only affects the accuracy by 1.4 metres and is significantly still in excess of the separation distances required by the Council's own policy. Just referring to that, the SPD for residential extensions advises that a separation distance of 21 metres window to window is required to prevent overlooking and loss of privacy. Plot 08 is 29 metres from 11 Chestnut Avenue, significantly in excess of the Council's 21 metre guidance. The distance from new plot 09 and the dwellings at 9 Chestnut Avenue are a minimum of 27.5 metres from the 2-storey element and 23.5 from the single-storey element, again both in excess of the Council standards. My client is also aware that objections have been raised regarding the impact of the development on properties in Green Lane. The window-to-window separation distance in this instance is almost 29 metres at its closest point, as much as 8 metres in excess of the Council standards. Whether it is a front-to-back or back-to-back relationship is immaterial. So in conclusion, in line with government policy and the NPPF, members need to consider whether the perceived loss of amenity on 11 Chestnut Avenue would amount to an adverse impact that would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of providing 21 affordable houses to contribute to the significant and growing need for affordable homes in Farnham.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Members, it's open to you. Councillor Frost.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. I've got a couple of questions before I make an observation. It is very disappointing to see that Farnham Town Council have not sent in any comments. And also, could I have a bit more explanation about the County Highway Authority, because they are talking about a footpath. So I just need a few more bits of information about that. I did go on a site visit this morning, and whilst I understand that in some people's view it's a very compact development, I think it is a very suitable development for this area. This particular area is made up of social housing in a lot of respects. There are very few of the other type of housing. So for me, this is in the right sort of location. However, I am a little bit concerned about number 38, which seems there, if you look at the plan we have in front of us here, is bordering on the red line. Now, can somebody explain to me how much room there is between the last house of that 3 and number 38's boundary? because it seems to me much less, and that hasn't been mentioned anywhere. So I'm interested in that. But otherwise, I would like to find ways that we might actually grant this application as opposed to refusing it. I'm also concerned that, you know, there's been 4 weeks since the last meeting. At the last meeting, they had not signed the agreement, and they still haven't signed it. Why not? Because if they are serious about wanting this development, then they should have put everything into place to ensure that if we were minded to grant it, that we could do it straight away. But without those agreements in place, I doubt if we can grant it. But I will be advised by the officers. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Potts.
Thank you, Chairman. I, like Mrs Frost and probably other members, in principle support a proposal of development at this site. I also think a mix of affordable and social housing is, again, suitable for this site and clearly very much needed. However, and this is where we come to the big however, that cannot be allowed, and it cannot be allowed to cloud fundamental planning judgment. And as I say, I was on the site visit yesterday. I was extremely concerned about the impact on the amenity of the properties in Green Lane, and even more so on the ones in Chestnut Avenue. I find it very, very disappointing that we're here again a month on from the last meeting, that still certain aspects of agreements haven't been signed. I know that the Speaker said that that would be the case, but we still haven't had that happen. That in spite of a lot of the guidance that has come from officers, we are even sitting here having this discussion, and that no further negotiations have happened, when I think if the orientation and the density of this application was properly addressed, we may be in a position that we could grant this application. So I find the whole way that this has moved forward, and I think the only words I can use are extremely disappointing. And as such, and the way I see it at the moment, and what I see before me tonight, I'm afraid I will not be supporting the application. Thank you.
Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The officers have reported comprehensively and recommended that the application be refused. However, on nearly every count I read, the officers judge the scheme to be acceptable, and only on the one important practical aspect it is deemed to be unacceptable, namely houses 8 and 9 on the high ground at the southern end of the site impinge on the established privacy of their neighbours to east and west. Reading between the lines of the report, I suspect there's mutual frustration creeping into the negotiations. Thames Valley Housing appear to be reluctant to amend their scheme, and Waverley planners are unable to concede an important principle. Yet I, like others, must confess that I am of the opinion that this is essentially a very good scheme, perhaps one that could be made a bit better. 21 affordable dwellings for rental or shared ownership on a brownfield site, which has been proven to have no further commercial use, and which places only a modest burden upon the existing infrastructure. This is exactly the sort of scheme that Farnham needs. I believe that need to be paramount, and I bet there are many young families and key workers who would agree with me. Thames Valley, please note, we are so close, it should not be beyond the wit of a competent designer and an imaginative developer to reduce the privacy intrusion for the neighbours, and compromise is called for. It's very tempting for me as an ex-engineer to make suggestions, but I'm told councillors are not here to do that. We are not here to unduly contradict experienced planning officers either. So, with regret, I have to agree refusal of this application. But please do try again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to echo those comments, actually, because I agree with all of them. I'd just like to add that whilst I think the scheme is a good scheme, and I quite like the mix of housing, it cannot and must not be at the expense of amenity and a loss of privacy to those neighbours that have been there for some years. And I do think it can be addressed and it can be looked at and a better scheme can be delivered. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Councillor Coburn.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think those of us who went on the site visit were actually quite shocked. I think the ramp at the back of the site was sort of bigger, you know, in the flesh, as it were, than anything we'd seen in the report. And certainly the difference in heights on that site mean that whatever's put there has to be thought through. I don't think this has been thought through. I mean, I'm sure you're going to tell me you spend hours sitting down with them. But I think you've got two issues here. I think looking at the site, it's a very difficult site. So the solution might not fit in with our housing mix policy, and quite frankly, I really don't see why it should. I think this site is such a difficult site to do. Of course we want 24 affordable homes. It's like Miss World, isn't it, wanting to work with children, old people, and sewing all the sequins on herself. You know, it's apple pie and whatever they say. You know, of course we want the 24 affordable housing. It's in the neighbourhood plan. It's an ideal site for development. You're never going to get employment on this site in the way it was always a bit odd in its later years anyway as an employment site. But just because we need 21 affordable homes does not mean we want 21 affordable homes that are poorly developed on a site that is difficult. Standing in the garden of, which one was it, 65? You can see the difference in levels completely because, you know, his garden is at a certain level. You've got this ramp up to where the single-storey dwelling is now, and the thought of that being a two-storey, it is just going to dwarf the surrounding properties. And in fact, I think most of us were shocked at Chestnut Avenue, which in a funny way, you know, because the step down was steeper, you could see the difference in ground levels. So I'm terribly disappointed. When I saw this was coming in, like Councillor Fraser, I thought, oh, great, you know, we're going to get it. But no, this is just not right. Maybe it's the density, it's certainly the style. I just think you've got to go back to the drawing board on this one and produce the homes that we need, but in a style and a manner that doesn't detract from neighbours' amenity on quite such a big scale.
Thank you. Councillor Humphreys.
Well, I wasn't able to go on the site visit yesterday, but reading the officer's report, I thought, gosh, they're mad. It sounds quite right. They should be able to put the houses there. So I took myself off to Waverley Lane and up Chestnut Avenue and Green Lane. And I was quite shocked by the lift of the ramp, just seeing how awful it would be for people in Chestnut Avenue and Green Lane. I too would like it to go forward. I would like the social mix, but I cannot support this application in any way as it currently is. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Officers, you were asked about the distance between. Could you take that one on board, Councillor?
Thank you, Chairman. Just to address the points that Councillor Frost raised. Firstly, with regards to the highways recommendations, you can't really see it on this plan, but it is proposed to take the footpath within the site. This was queried by the County Highway Authority, who is now happy and satisfied that this can be resolved by way of conditions if you feel that you want to go against the recommendation. With regards to number 38, this property here, there is a distance on the side of the application side of 1.4 metres to the boundary. That is a flank-to-flank relationship, so two blank flanks to each other. Obviously, the SPD guidance recommends, in most cases, a separation of 1 metre to prevent terracing. And finally, with regards to the agreements, I understand from our solicitor. Yep, Joe will answer with regards to that.
Sorry, it makes sense if I answer. Essentially, Erica has been dealing with the agreements for this site. There are two, the SPA agreement and the affordable housing agreement. The SPA agreement, in Erica's absence, I actually confirmed we were content with the drafting on Friday of last week. So technically that, subject to the other side agreeing, and I see no reason why they wouldn't, that is actually agreed in final form and could be submitted as far as I'm concerned. In respect of the affordable housing, there were still some instructions that we were waiting for that have now come back in, and they have been relayed to the applicant solicitor. So it's in the very later stages of drafting, but the affordable housing agreement is still not quite there. And I'm sure could be finalised very quickly, but it's still not an acceptable place at the moment.
Thank you for that. Councillor Blank.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The thing that worries me is the way in which these buildings are being crammed together and the size of the actual buildings themselves, bearing in mind the fact, yes, I know that they are small flats, but if you look at the surrounding area, there is very little relationship to the density and other factors of the other. For instance, on Chestnut Avenue, they're completely different, and it's the same with Green Lane. And I think this is a bit dangerous that we're going to that density in one spot area. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, members. Let's move on then, if there are no further questions. The recommendation is that permission be refused for the reasons 1 to 3 and informatives 1 to 2 are set out on pages 44 and 45 of the report. May I have those in favour of the recommendation to refuse, please show.
That's unanimous.
Thank you. Thank you, members. The recommendation to refuse is agreed. Moving on then to item 7.3, item B1, WA 2015/0651. Change of use of the upper floors to provide 3 new dwellings at 1 to 2 Castle Street, Farnham, GU9 7HR. And I believe Louise is going to introduce this application.
Thank you, Chair. The site is located on the western side of Castle Street, close to the corner with West Street. This slide shows an aerial photograph of the site, with the site positioned here. The site is currently offered by Cafe Nero at ground floor level. The upper floors are currently unoccupied, but these were previously used as ancillary accommodation in association with the previous ground floor use. This is the ground floor plan. The flats would be accessed via the existing side passageway with the staircase here leading to the upper floors. Bin and cycle storage is provided here, adjacent to the entrance. The first floor would be reconfigured internally to provide 2 one-bedroom flats, one here and one here. The internal changes have recently been granted listed building consent. At second floor, a 2-bedroom flat would be provided. A new window would be installed here. This is the new entrance and the entrance to the bin storage. 3 new roof lights would be installed in the rear elevation. The existing window would be replaced with one with a higher sill level, and the making good would match the existing building. There has recently been planning permission approved for the upper floors to be converted into 2 two-bedroom flats. The main differences between that approved application and this scheme is that now 3 flats are proposed. The matters of technical judgment are the principle of the development, housing land supply, the impact on the listed building, highways access and vehicle parking, the impact on air quality, the effect on the SPAs, and the impact on archaeology. The matters of judgment for members this evening are loss of the lawful use, the compatibility of uses, the standard of accommodation and provision of amenity space, and the impact on visual amenity and the conservation area, and the impact on residential amenity. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Louise. So, members, your turn. Councillor Blackton.
Sorry, as ward member for this particular area, and i.e. Castle Street and other places like that, we have been trying for some time to make sure that any space available within Farnham itself should be utilised for accommodation if it's not being used for anything else, and all that can be used is the upstairs stories. And so from that point of view, I find it difficult to say, well, we've been asking the whole time that you make what use of the space is available, and now as soon as you put it up, we say no. I think that this is, it's not a lovely site, but it's more, technically it's more suitable, I think, than some others. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Frost.
Can I just check what we're doing here? Because I thought really what we're doing is a change of use for 2 of the 3 flats. Because it says on page 49, proposal planning permission is sought for the change of use of the 1st and 2nd floor of the building from ancillary staff accommodation associated with the previous Class A4. So we're not actually agreeing a planning application, are we not? We're just actually agreeing a change of use.
It's a planning application for a change of use, that's correct.
Right, but we're not actually looking at how many bedrooms they've got, etc., as a traditional planning application. We're just looking at change of use.
Well, the change of use is for the 3 flats, so as part of that, you can look at the accommodation provided.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, I thought we'd had this one, and I thought we'd agreed it. Yes, we have. So, agreed.
Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As has just been said, we not long ago agreed that this was a wonderful reuse of spare space in Castle Street above a retail outlet, and the only thing that seems to be different is that instead of 2 flats spread over 2 floors, we now have 3 flats, 2 of which are 1 bedrooms instead of 2 bedroom, and I can't see why we're bothering to discuss it at any great length. It makes no sense to me to worry about it.
That was only in January this year. Councillor Potts.
It's Groundhog Day, Mr. Chairman, isn't it? I think the bottom line is, from my point of view, as I said back in January, it's great to see buildings and parts of buildings that aren't being properly utilised being brought back into use. We want a vibrant town centre. We want a mix of retail and residential use. This ticks all of those boxes. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm fully supportive of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Hargreaves.
Actually, I think what we actually said, that this was an absolute no-brainer.
I think we did.
Thank you very much indeed. I just checked with the officers on historic England, although in view of what happened in January, I don't think that's really applicable anymore.
We still haven't heard from them yet, but we anticipate that they won't object, but we will need to wait before we issue the decision for them to confirm that.
6 months? Gosh.
That's a short time in history.
Short time in, yes. In that case, thank you, members. Let's see no further questions. Can we move to the recommendation? The recommendation is that, subject to the conditions 1 to 7 and informative 1 on pages 72 and 73, and no objection from Historic England, permission be granted. May I have those in favour, please show. Unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. That is agreed. No further items for discussion. Meeting is closed.